Hello, everybody. Each week, we dive into a hot topic about video games. And this week, we're going to be talking about the future of gaming conventions with our buddy here, Justin from Dreamhack. Justin, welcome back again. You're still here with us. How awesome is that?
I'm still here somehow.
I know.
It feels good. Feels good to somehow still be here. Especially as somebody who works in the event space, being here is a very tricky prospect for a lot of my peers, for sure.
Yeah. So I want to have open this up with the opportunity for you to dive deeper into what you do. For those that may not have heard the first podcast, obviously we did a brief introduction of you at the very beginning, but tell me fully what it is you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Justin Varghese. I'm the North American Marketing Manager for Dreamhack. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Dreamhack, it's the world's premier gaming lifestyle festival. Started off as a small LAN between a group of friends who met up in a cafeteria for a weekend of gaming, hacking, and coding. And since then has grown significantly to the point where we've held the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest LAN in history. And whenever it's not a global pandemic, we typically tend to do about 14 events worldwide with an estimated global attendance upwards of 350,000 people. So it's a big deal. Yeah. Right now, as you can imagine, we're not really doing a lot of that when it comes to the live event portion. But very fortunately, we have a really strong production base for the company itself. And as a result of that, we've been able to do a lot of really high-profile online events. The Fortnite event that we've been doing has a $250,000 prize pool. The first week it was out, I think we had something ludicrous like 450,000 competitors participating in that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's nuts. It gets pretty crazy. But yeah, we're just trying to, very eagerly prepare so that whenever events do come back, we can come back, better than ever before.
Yeah. So I want to start by flashbacking to, the early days of the COVID when it hit the United States and first reactions. I mean, we're looking like March-ish time. What were y'all's first, reactions to this, thoughts? Like what was what you can talk about, the internal thought process is going through your head of like preparing for this, knowing you had all these events coming up? Like, what did those inner discussions look like?
Well, the first thing was, thank God Anaheim was in February.
Yeah.
Because we had Dreamhack Anaheim. It was a first year event. And I think we did that like the weekend of February 21st, something like that. So just before things got real crazy. Crazy.
Yeah, everyone was talking about like even all the other events going on. They're like, this just happened. Like it's going down right now as these events are happening.
It's weird to think that for a lot of people, the last gaming event they went to was Dreamhack Anaheim, right?
Yeah.
It was either Dreamhack or PAX for a lot of folks. And so for us, back whenever it was March, we had a team that was put together to monitor the situation, figure out what the next moves were. As things really escalated, in particular in the United States, we realized that the event that we had planned to do with Akon in May was really not going to happen. And so we ended up pushing back our event to August, hopeful that things would clear up in Dallas so that we could be able to do the event there. Spoiler alert, it did not. So we ended up having
we're holding out,
postpone it.
but yeah,
we had to postpone it all the way to next year now, with Akon really doing the same as well, and we're now doing separate events as a result of that. And very recently we've had to make the unfortunate cancellation and postponement of all of our remaining events for this calendar year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been tough. It's been really tough. For us, like a lot of Dreamhack is really about connecting with people, old and new, and that's the best part of it for a lot of our attendees is that moment where you look at somebody's badge and you see the name and you recognize the tag and you're like, I know you. We haven't met before in person, but we've been playing games together for so long. Like that moment is everything, and the fact that we can't facilitate that this year, I think is probably what hurts the most, to be honest. But we're just taking it a day at a time and just trying to take the time that we have to just make a better product overall and a better company for the long term.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I can't even imagine like the first days of, especially having rescheduled from May to August and then having to eventually, ultimately cancel it. Like, had to be like a logistical nightmare to navigate through all that stuff. So, I mean, kudos to the team for all the things that y'all have been able to weather through and still maintain a presence. So, on that note, like now that you're not doing any other events, like what are some of the new activations and things that y'all are working on to just kind of keep things going and stay focused in 2020 to move things forward, the Dreamhack community?
All right, I'm gonna put my nerdy marketing hat on one more time.
Oh yeah.
So I think the biggest challenge, if we take away the pandemic for a second and be critical about the event space as a whole, here's the big challenge that everybody has. For them, they announce an event is happening. People are like, oh, hell yeah, this event's happening. I'm really excited. And then all the hype kind of dies down for a little bit. There's blips here and there whenever announcements happen about the event. And then it's, a month, 2 weeks, the week of the event, anticipation soars so high. The event itself happens and the chatter around the event is at an all-time high. It's the day after the event and people for the next week are posting, oh, I miss being at Dreamhack. And then it's crickets for like the next 9 months, right? Until we repeat that cycle over and over again. That is how it is for just about every event-focused company in the world, period, right? So for us as a brand, the big conversation is, how do we move aside from having Dreamhack Dallas fans, Dreamhack Atlanta fans, Dreamhack Summer fans, Dreamhack Montreal fans, Dreamhack, et cetera. How do we move aside from that cyclical sort of cycle and make it so that instead we have Dreamhack 365 fans who are plugged in year-long worldwide? That's the big focus for our team during these times, is to build up that side of it. I know a lot of other folks in the event space have really focused on the idea of what a virtual event would look like as a standalone. And for us, we're less interested in what I would call a COVID Band-Aid and more interested in trying to figure out, well, how can we make long-term products or that, eventually we can scale up and actually integrate into our festivals as content pieces. So, for example, something very little that we have is our podcast, right? The Dreamhack Download. The idea with that is, in addition to, giving the gaming communities the inside scoop on what's happening, not only with Dreamhack, but within the gaming ecosystem as a whole, we would like to make it so that we can eventually scale that podcast up to the point where at the next Dreamhack event that we can do, it's actually the Dreamhack podcast live, right? Yeah. Where the audience can participate and we're giving our thoughts like we normally would in front of them, etc. I think little things like that are really helpful. It's just a matter of trying to figure out, okay, what content pieces work, what don't work, what new content pieces can we do to really appease our existing fans, what content pieces can we have to bring in new fans, and how does it all tie into the big picture of Dreamhack, especially whenever we're ramped up again fully with events to the point where we can have a good workflow that allows us to keep doing these content pieces without taking away from the enormous amount of work that it takes to actually put on the event itself. So It's a bit of a balancing act. It's a lot of experimentation right now, but it's been fun. Yeah.
No, I've really been enjoying the, as far as like the content y'all have been putting out, like the Dreamhack Download I've been listening to. I've listened to every episode, really enjoyed it. I enjoy the dynamics between everybody. Like you can obviously tell that y'all are good friends, in addition to being coworkers. But I really appreciate that, insider industry look at these event space, like hearing all the different roles that your team has and how they're approaching, like from the, having the creative director on there talking about, the different things with the events themselves and just the different dialogues that y'all have had has been really interesting to hear from that perspective. Because a lot of times you're hearing people on podcasts that are either journalists who have that perspective, or there's people like us who are just like, love gaming and we talk about video games, but there's like a third perspective that y'all bring to it because you're doing something a little bit, you're not journalists, you're not, just gamers, you're like super involved in this gaming space and growing the community as a whole and like building the community aspect from a global scale. Right. And so seeing those insider just insights into just the logistics behind how this stuff works, and also the excitement that you all have about this, like it made me appreciate DreamHack more, because like I can tell that everybody like just generally is very much like passionate about what they're doing and with the company and the whole entire brand and everything, and that's really cool to see. So yeah, big fan of that, and looking forward to seeing more of that and hearing more of the voices from inside. So that's been good.
Yeah, I mean, we love doing it, man, and I think it does help that like the job itself is, it's so valuable, right? Like it just brings you joy whenever you're able to do everything right. Like I'm not gonna lie, the moments leading up to an event, and maybe this is something we haven't talked about personally, because the last time we talked in depth about this was well before DreamHack was supposed to happen in Dallas last year, right? But now that I've gone through a couple, I can tell you that it is so stressful. Especially like the week that's leading up to it, it is ludicrously stressful. The amount of work that really goes into it. I mean, you're staying up like crazy. You're working constantly. It's tough, arduous, backbreaking work for sure. But once you're at the show and you see those faces and you have that one moment after all those fires have all been put out or whatever, right? In the morning, when something finally works and you see the faces and the joy that people have that are there, it clicks that, wow, like we're not doing this for ourselves, right? We're doing this for all these people. And that's really hard right now, is that I can't necessarily do that the way that I would like to. And I totally understand why, of course. I'm eager to be able to help grow more events whenever it is safe to do so. But until then, all we can do is really try to figure out how can we provide that same value that we gave our fans just digitally instead.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
What does that look like? 365 DreamHack minus the podcast.
Yeah, that's $1 million question.
Yeah.
I think so. So for me, I think a big part of it would be really expanding what we're doing digitally more than anything else. 365 is not only a reference to fans being engaged with us, year long and everything like that, but it also represents an opportunity for us as DreamHack to potentially set up new revenue streams also, right? That are not necessarily just tied to us doing events or doing, big productions, right? Trying to figure out ways where, we're providing our fans a disproportionate amount of value from an entertainment perspective, and then simultaneously setting up ways to appease the partners that we work with to give them more value as well, I think is really the big side of it for us, right? I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do, of course, when it comes to our content itself, making sure that every single time that we're putting out a content piece, we're constantly evaluating what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to do moving forward? Does this piece make sense to continue? Does it make sense to pivot in some sort of way? Asking those kinds of hard questions is super important for us because, again, like we're trying to make it so that it's very valuable, right? And it's something that people have a lot of joy from, right? Even if it's not 100% of the joy that they would normally have going to a DreamHack event, we want to make sure that there is a proportional amount of joy that is surmised from that content. And then beyond that, also identifying in the future, okay, well, maybe outside of our company, what are interesting content pieces that other people are doing that we can somehow support or bring into like our media portfolio of sorts, if you will, right? Like those are, I guess, more long-term kind of goals that we have around that. But I think that once we do that, then now we have like a really thorough content funnel that will keep our audience entertained year long, and combine that also with like a lot of other insider things that I can't really talk about right now, is going to make it so that the view of our brand is going to be, I think really, really different, especially whenever things kind of ramp up a bit for us.
So would you consider yourselves the pack leaders? Because maybe just because I know you and you've me and Brett kind of, follow you guys. It's just kind of one of those things that we see is happening, but I don't see a lot of other people doing it. Or maybe I just don't see it happening or following the right organizations. I don't know.
I wouldn't go as far as to say that we're leaders of the packs or that we're the apex predator or anything like that. Whenever it comes to we're not the king of the jungle. We're not the king of the jungle by any means yet, right? There's a lot of very well established names that are out there that, from a numbers perspective, from a developer and partnerships perspective, really are significantly above where we are. But the way that we look at it is normally that would be a very bad thing for us. But actually, the one silver lining about all of this is that now everyone in the event space, in my opinion, is on an even playing field.
Yeah.
The reality is that whenever events do come back, everyone is going to take a hit whenever it comes to the number of people that are attending, right? I can't say that I can see, just because I'm thinking about it right now, I can't say that I see an event like in the anime space, Anime Expo, right? It normally pulls in, 120,000 unique visitors, right? I don't see their return being that many people necessarily, right? I feel like they're going to not have as many folks. But the amount of people that they would lose on a year back versus the amount of people we would lose on a year back is way less for us and way more for some of these bigger players, which is why I think that it is more of an even playing field of sorts. And I'm really hoping that because of some of the strategies that we're doing right now, and because we are a little bit smaller and we can think much more nimbly maybe than some of the other players out there, when we come back, I think that our growth curve is going to be really, really beneficial overall. And it's going to make it so that we can kind of be, I guess, at the head of the table, if you will.
Yeah.
So what's everyone else doing then right now? Are they doing similar things like y'all?
No, I mean, I think that a lot of other folks in the event space are a little bit more interested in maybe doing a standalone virtual event instead, right? For me, the way that I look at just a standalone virtual event for somebody like us, I feel like it would be something that maybe we'd put a lot of resources into, but it wouldn't have nearly enough payoff. And most importantly, it wouldn't have long lasting impacts, right? Because if you do a virtual event, you have value for, I don't know, if you're lucky, a week, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about it. If you're lucky, it's a week. It doesn't necessarily move the needle for anything next year or anything like that. It, again, like I was saying before, it's a bit more of a COVID Band-Aid. That's, again, my opinion. There's a lot of people who are way smarter than me that think otherwise. And I'll trust their marketing teams and their decisions around that completely. But for me, I see that as more of a Band-Aid maneuver than anything else. I think they're in this space where it's probably among the few event companies that are really more focused on dialing in from a content perspective and starting to ramp that up a bit. But it remains to be seen who's going to have the winning strategy long term, right?
Yeah. I mean, everybody's, really trying to navigate this whole new normal or whatever this new normal looks like. And no, there are no answers. There's no playbook for this. It's not like you can look at, you start an event, like you have a playbook of what other event companies have done pre-COVID, but now that we're in this new world, it's like there is no answers out there for what the right path is to do until you do the path and then hope that what you're doing is gonna hit, And then the other thing too, it's like we don't know when things are gonna get back to like the way, or if they ever will get back to the way they were. So I'm curious on like with that, as you're planning for, knowing eventually there will be events in the future, and like, what are those going to look like? What are some things that y'all are thinking about? Again, stuff that you can talk about that is in preparation for this, knowing that there are going to be a percentage of people that are going to be uncomfortable returning to a convention. How are you going to figure out ways to make them feel as comfortable as possible? I mean, that's, I feel like, the hardest thing to navigate.
Well, safety is a huge aspect of it. Some of the things that we're talking about internally are ways we can make sure that we can better I guess better mitigate the high congestion areas, right? Heavy traffic areas. So that could be things like wider aisles, for instance, between booths to make sure that whenever people are walking together, it's not like they're packed like sardines necessarily, right? There's thoughts of things like temperature checks and things like that, of course, at the door. And then there's also like other concepts too. And I think that this is probably what I'm very interested in, not only in regards to what we as Dreamhack do, but also how the live event industry as a whole changes. Right now, it feels like the meta for a successful event is really determined by how many people show up. And that's like the pure metric, right? Like the bigger, the better consistently. I'm curious to see, well, if it gets to a point where because of whatever limitations, we're only allowed to have X amount of people in the venue. What do you do to make that venue still convey the same amount, if not more value for that amount of people?
Right.
What kind of tweaks can you make to your event to make it so that it has the best aspects and more, and it's now been optimized for the amount of people that are present and available? I think that those are the things that are very exciting to me personally. And again, it's something that I have no answers to because I'm just a dumb marketing guy. There's just a lot of thoughts in my head in regards to what events could potentially look like. But I am very excited. It reminds me actually a lot. There's this video on YouTube that I really like. Maybe y'all have seen it. It's of this guy who's dancing at a festival by himself, right? It starts off and it's just literally this one dude dancing at a festival by himself. After like a minute and a half of this person's recording, finally someone else joins him. And then like 30 seconds after that, one more person joins him. Like 5 seconds after that, two more people join them. And then eventually by the end of the video, it's a massive dance party that was all caused by one person, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's how live event growth typically works, right? Where the first couple times you do it, it's consistent, but it's a little bit slow. And then eventually you'll have like this massive spiking inflection point where people will come on like crazy. The head of marketing for Anime Expo, I had a pleasure to talk with her. It's a girl named Megan, and she mentioned to me that there was like that moment where one year they literally, I think they doubled in size in regards to how many people came. Wow. And they were like, holy crap, this is so many people. But with COVID, what is ultimately going to happen is that every single event is going to be back to that square one, right? Maybe not necessarily just the one guy dancing by themselves, but it's going to be more like it's three people dancing. Yeah. And I think what makes or breaks and determines who's going to survive this long term is what the experience is for those three people dancing that makes it so that for everyone else who is just kind of watching on the sidelines, they feel comfortable participating.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. I mean, I almost think of things where, you look at just from a numbers perspective or a money perspective, like you charge X amount of dollars per head that comes in. And like you were saying, like volume is like one of the bigger metrics of, 100,000 people is better than having 80,000 people for the price point that they're paying. But I could see like, if there is an expectation of a smaller group of people coming, like increase, like offer, I don't know if it's tiers or what it could look like. Like, for example, I go to the Austin City Limits Festival every year. And, when it was happening. And when I go there, it's like I buy the general admission pass, but then they have like, 5 different tiers of passes you can get that give you like, you get front row, like reserved area seating, plus like air conditioned bathrooms, this, that, whatever. Like I could see something like that providing value for gamers who want a more, I could, if you have like some famous people or some interesting people that are there that you can get like exclusive, one-on-one conversations with, that could be really cool to go through all of that. So I don't know if you guys have looked into things of that nature, but there's definitely a lot of things that could be done to just make that single person feel that more personalized, kind of customized experience that's a little higher, I guess, than what you normally expect.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is not necessarily just tied to the numbers specifically in regards to how many people come, but really what the feeling is, right? If we can convey that strong community feeling, even if we take a dip in the amount of people that come the next time we're able to do events, I think that that's still successful, because it means that we are like, the feeling itself is the hardest part, right? The feeling itself is something that a lot of people in the event space tried to replicate in one way or another.
Yeah.
If you don't get the feeling right for 10 people, you can't grow it to 100,000 people, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. I think for us, that's the big thing, is like, okay, making sure that we have that strong sense of community, regardless of how many people we are able to have in the building. That's the big thing. And if we can do that, if we can provide that kind of value, then I think we're going to be set long term.
Yeah. And that first event's such a big piece of it. Like once you get there, I mean, even if you know that there's going to be a huge cut, if you have those people that are there walk away and they're like, this was the best post-COVID experience I could have possibly had. Right. They're going to tell all their friends, and they're going to be like, this is the place that you need to be for this, safety experience, all that stuff. And it's just going to keep going up from that point. So that first one of like building those, the brand ambassadors, are the key piece of, that growth. I think that helps a lot.
Well, you got me excited because yeah, I mean, it's fun to go to like PAX and stuff and Dreamhack and all these things that have like lots of people, and I do hate crowds, but having a more intimate experience with less people, I think, can make for a better experience. You can, meet new people, actually talk to people. You're not just lost in a sea of bodies. You can actually, even the devs could probably be more intimate of, game devs that you have come, because there's not a lot of people to deal with. They see thousands of people, so they're just kind of like in and out. All right, here's the game and all that. For the most part, they do a pretty good job. Even at the other events we went to, it's literally packed shoulder to shoulder. But I think it's gotten me a little excited because of that. Who knows who I can meet? I can actually look at people without seeing heads everywhere.
Tons of heads all over the place.
Yeah,
I do. It does feel nice sometimes. Whenever I go up to HQ, usually we'll have like a room that kind of oversees the whole show floor, and just seeing the sea of people sometimes, it's like, I feel that's cool. That's super cool. But even if the sea turns into maybe a lake for a year, I think that it could still be an amazing experience regardless.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about the width of halls or like lanes and stuff like that. And I thought that was one thing I walked away from Dreamhack this past year when we went, that I really appreciated, because like I've been going to Comic-Con, Dallas Comic-Con or Fan Expo, whatever, at the same venue for several years. And it's like, I feel like it's super narrow hallways, and I feel like a sardine when I'm walking through the lanes. But that was one thing. And I think in Dreamhack Download, one of your guys was talking about like that was like a decision that like there's that main lane that was like really wide, and I was like, that was the first thing that I thought of when I went there. I was like, I feel like I can move and I can like flex, like as I'm like traveling through this space. And
we got that giant really camera. Nice. Try not to hit people.
Right. Good stuff. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about just like how other gaming groups and things have been handling the change in the fact that we didn't have E3 this year. We haven't had any PAX except for the first PAX at the beginning of the year. All these different things not happening that typically, like, at E3 we have all these all these announcements crammed into like this 1 week. And then now these publishers and stuff have been figuring out ways to adapt to, well, how do we, get our content out there? So there's been all these, what's been kind of cool is seeing the like consistent set of streams that have been going on throughout it. How have you and your team like thought of this and seen how, like, do you think have they handled it well? Is there any thoughts that you've had about that new way of like information and stuff, like getting, presented to the community now that there is no COVID? Or anybody out there that you're like, hey, these guys are doing it really well?
I guess I'm slightly biased here, because even though I got love for E3, they are competitors.
Right, yeah.
but what we feel like internally, and it's more of a growing sensation, I think, industry-wide, is E3, is kind of having a little bit of an identity crisis of sorts, right?
Yeah.
When they started off, it felt like it was really kind of developer focused and more of like an industry specific event. Now it's kind of this weird thing where like, is it an industry event? Is it a journalist event? Is it a public event? It's still trying to figure out what it's trying to do, while simultaneously charging the people who kind of build up the show an exorbitant amount of money to build up the show, right? That's one of the reasons why I think companies like Nintendo, for instance, and others have sort of kind of gone and done their own digital events even before COVID, was to make it so that they would be able to avoid, the exorbitant amount of fees that they would have to pay for providing E3 with content, essentially, right? Yeah. That's a model that we really don't really subscribe to be honest. Like for us, when it comes to publishers and developers, we're really, really happy with trying to support them however we can. So if at the end of the day, like if a pub or dev is bringing value to the show, we're willing to go the extra mile to make sure that they have the space that they need and things like that, without charging it an arm and a leg for that, because we view that as content, right? Mm-hmm. But all that aside for a second, I think that even though there hasn't been a center focal point for all of these announcements this year, I still feel like there is so much hype regardless, right? Even if that hype is not conveyed over a week-long period, it really is, I think, ramped up consistently because of all these different showcases and announcements that have been happening. And I've honestly preferred it, to be honest. It feels like because it's a little bit more spaced out and it's not as crammed together, each of these individual presentations have had a lot of time to build up strong marketing campaigns and strong content as well to go along with it. Some stronger than others, for sure. Yeah. But I've, for the most part, actually enjoyed it. And what I'm curious about is to see if come next year, if Sony and Microsoft in particular are going to come back to E3 after seeing just how successful what they were able to do with their own standalone shows here, we're able to hit, right? Like if you look at the numbers for E3 and contrast them to the numbers this year, is it really all that different? And if it's not, then does it make sense to still have a presence at that event when the journalists, if that's the angle you're going for, are going to write about your announcements regardless? I don't know. It's a lot to think about there. Yeah. But yeah, I think that it's going to have a pretty considerable impact in regards to maybe what E3 thinks of itself, and how the event, if it comes back, is going to maybe need to change a bit to stay relevant.
Yeah, the E3, I mean, we even saw kind of the writing on the wall earlier this year before even COVID happened with Jeff Keighley pulling out of running the call, I think the E3 Coliseum or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of interesting changes that were happening even before they announced that it had to cancel because of COVID. So I'm anxious to see what this time does for them in preparation for next year. How they do adapt and change, because I think there's been plenty of vocal voices out there saying that something needs to change with E3. Because we went 2 years ago, was it Austin that we went? 2018, I think.
Yep.
And I've been looking forward to going to that event forever. And I went and I walked away, it was cool to see some industry. I walked right by Hideo Kojima. I was like, that's cool. Nice. But other than that, I waited in line for 5 hours to play Call of Duty World War II. And that was just, it was cool to talk to people, but also miserable at the same time, because it's just, you're waiting in lines and that's not fun. You want to be around other people, and they don't have as much of that, Dreamhack and PAX. There's this whole community bonding kind of ideology that is so centric to the events that is why you kind of go there. You go to E3 to see cool games and stuff like that, but after having gone that one time, I'm like, I appreciate it better this year with the streams throughout the year, because it's it also gives a lot more focus to these games that otherwise would get forgotten, because you just cram through 35, 40 games in a week, whereas now you're having them much more spaced out and gives them much more weight to each game and lets people remember them and kind of digest them a little bit more than they normally would.
Very true. Very true.
So, Austin, were you going to say something?
I was going to say,
I kept talking.
Even the press pass, even if you had a press pass, there was still a line.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. So yeah, it was great that first time, but I was like, I don't want to deal with that crowds. And then for, here in Texas, we can actually create content. Like we don't have to wait. We couldn't really take anything with us. Did we even take mics? Did we create a podcast out there?
At E3, I think we did. Well, I don't remember actually.
Yeah,
I don't know. Probably did.
It just wasn't feasible for us to actually do anything. So it's kind of makes sense not to actually go.
Yeah.
So
I think somebody told me that the true E3 experience is not to get a badge, but just to get a room at the JW Marriott and hang out at the bar there. You'll run into everybody that way that you want to meet.
That is super true, actually.
That's awesome.
I mean, I feel like that's the way with a lot of conventions and stuff too. Like if they're at a place where there's a lot of like big name people, like the best place to meet them is at the after party events and find them at those things instead. That's always the excitement that comes into play. It's like this last PAX this year. I mean, we went to this Gearbox party afterwards, and that was awesome because we met all kinds of people from different places.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were down there. We were trying to meet up, and we weren't able to meet up. And I was so bummed.
What happened? I don't remember exactly what happened. I
think y'all were tired that day or like just got worn out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, my wife wasn't feeling too hot. Dang. Yeah,
but we tried.
I'm told it was a fun time.
Oh yeah,
a pretty wild party because Gearbox.
Oh yeah, no, it was fun. We met some of the Akon people there, which was cool. So we were hanging out with them for a little bit.
Yep.
And I met tons of people, and it was a good time, and it was at a piano bar. So I mean,
it was
can't go wrong with that.
The Akon team, they're great people. Even among my group of friends, and I'm sure there's bias here because I work for Dreamhack, but we were all very excited for like the tag team, Dreamhack X Akon event.
So were we.
Dude, that would have been crazy. Like a million square feet of content.
Yeah.
Dude.
Oh my gosh.
Well, because wait, so how was a ticket sales for that? Was it you buy one ticket and you go to both, or I forgot how that worked out?
So we still had our individual events, but we also had the bundle pass, which was like the golden ticket that would get you into both events, essentially.
Yeah.
It was, man, and we had some plans. Oh, we had some plans, man.
Save those plans. Hopefully one of these days the stars will align and you'll be able to make it happen even bigger and better.
Well, the question is, will it still be relevant by the time y'all can do it?
Oh,
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's the thing is that, to preface, we're very fortunate. The things that I'm saying now where it's like, that COVID's a bit of a blessing in disguise for us because we're able to work on things that we normally wouldn't have time to work on otherwise. A lot of other event companies and event owners and operators don't have that luxury, right? We're very fortunate that we have the backing of our parent company that is fairly sizable, that views us as a long-term play and thus is, okay with weathering the storm as is. And a lot of more independent organizers don't have that. So it is really tough. And I really do feel for a lot of those, folks who maybe like derive their whole livelihood off of being able to do events that now all of a sudden can't. Like on our team, we have Alex Jabali. Aside from being the Jabated face on Twitch, he actually is a world-renowned fighting game organizer, right? He puts on some of the biggest fighting game events in the world.
Wow.
Events like CEO. He gets contracted by a ton of big publishers to help them put on events, etc. And man, it's just like tough to talk to him and just hear like, a guy who had 3 events planned for this year and has to cancel 2 of them. And, the one event that he was able to do, he actually reversed his refund policy to make it so that people who were uncomfortable coming because cases were spiking were able to get free refunds as a result of that.
Wow.
like good dude. But the fact that he prioritized community over his own personal well-being there, like that is such a tough call to make. Even though it's the right call to make, it is really hard, I think. And I there's a lot of people I think who maybe can look on the outside and be like, oh, I would pick community over my well-being every time. without actually like thinking and actually putting themselves in those shoes and being like, yo, what if I can't eat tomorrow because of what I'm doing? You know?
Seriously.
Like it's tough. It's very tough. But I really am hoping that at the end of all of this, we're able to get really creative with it. I think that for me, when I think about some of my favorite films, some of my favorite games, etc., a lot of them have come out of times that have been marred with a lot of challenge, where maybe the money wasn't as much as they needed it to be. Maybe the conditions for filming weren't correct. Maybe things really weren't, I guess, up to expectations in regards to the conditions that were given to create this product or to create this piece of art. But they were able to use these hindrances as ways to create something unique that totally blew everyone's minds. And I hope that for the folks who are able to make it, like there is at least that amount to look forward to, right? That the future of events, not just for Dreamhack, but for all event organizers, is so much brighter than it could have ever been before. And that maybe it's not just strictly tied to how many people come to your event, but just how much value you can provide to those individual attendees at a much higher scale.
Yeah.
I like
Definitely.
it. It's like a refresh across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dig it, man.
Good opportunities. Awesome. Well, I think we'll probably wrap up this discussion here. So, Justin, tell us where people can find you, where we can find all the cool things that Dreamhack is doing right now. Let us know.
Sure. So you can find Dreamhack at Dreamhack on every single social platform. We have a ton of content pieces on our YouTube, as well as our podcast, the Dreamhack Download, which you can find on all your favorite podcast platforms by searching the Dreamhack Download. As for myself, you'll find me at jvarg1990 on all social platforms as well. I'm definitely most active, though, on Twitter. I am a fiend on Twitter, so get me there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, man, we really appreciate you having you on the show and for sticking with us on your Sunday, giving us your Sunday afternoon to hang out. Been a lot of fun catching up and stuff like that, and glad you're doing well, staying healthy, all that good stuff, and looking forward to hanging out in person again, and seeing each other face to face and playing some Smash Brothers.
Ooh, eventually.
Hell yeah.
We still gotta go to a brewery.
That.
Ooh, I know.
Yes, we do.
All the above. Well, everybody, again, thank you, Justin, for being on the show, and everybody that's listening. That's going to wrap it up for our discussion this week. If you want to contribute to next week's segment, give us a shout at theinnergamer.net, or you can join us on our Discord channel with that link in the show notes and let us know what you'd like to hear there.